10 seconds. That's all it took to go from a grieving father to public enemy number one in Lakeside Estate. I still remember the sound of the water that morning. Calm, quiet, healing. My daughter, Selin, was smiling. Actually smiling. For the first time in weeks, she had just reeled in a bluegill and was giggling about how slimy but cute it looked. For a split second, it felt like my wife Rachel was still here, that everything we lost hadn't torn us completely apart. And then she showed up, a voice as sharp as a snapped fishing line cut through the air. "Excuse me, but what exactly do you think you're doing?" Karen Wellington, president of the HOA, hair like it was sculpted by spite, designer sunglasses at 9 a.m., a clipboard and a tablet, as if she were inspecting a war zone, not a father fishing with his daughter on a Saturday morning. "Fishing is prohibited. This is a violation. The fine is $500. $500 for fishing. For helping my daughter heal. For doing the one thing that still connected us to Rachel. She didn't care. That was the moment something broke in me, something quiet, something precise. I didn't yell, I didn't argue. I just stared at her and realized she had no idea who she was dealing with. If you've ever been fined for the color of your mailbox, or told your welcome mat was too expressive, this story is for you. Because this isn't just about a lake, or a fine, or one HOA time. This is about how I used $350,000, 0 cents, a secret network of neighbors, and 15 years of venture capital experience to destroy an empire of pettiness, one violation at a time. I've met CEOs who could bankrupt a company with a single bad bet. I've negotiated with hedge fund managers who thought they were gods, but nothing prepared me for Karen Wellington. Let me paint the picture. Karen is the kind of woman who shows up to a community potluck with a gluten-free quiche that nobody asked for, and then judges you for bringing store-bought potato salad. She doesn't walk, she glides, like she owns the pavement. Her hair, think of every "I'd like to speak to the manager" meme you've ever seen. Except Karen is the manager of everything. She wasn't just HOA president, no. Karen was self-appointed Queen of Lakeside Estates, 8 years in power, re-elected by default because no one dared run against her. Every newsletter had her photo, every meeting her voice dominated. She held that tablet like it was a holy relic. Probably had the HOA bylaws bookmarked like other people save family photos. But here's the thing. Karen didn't enforce rules to help the community. She used them like a scalpel, selectively and strategically. If you were part of her little wine circle friend group, you could build a treehouse on your roof and she'd call it charming rustic flair, but if you so much as left your recycling bin out past 7, a 1 a.m.ing, and you weren't on her approved list, expect a fine, or 3. At first I thought maybe I was imagining it, that maybe I was just sensitive after losing Rachel. But the more I watched, the more obvious it became. Karen wasn't maintaining community standards, she was maintaining control. The way she spoke to me at the lake, that subtle, pointed comment about certain residents not fitting the neighborhood culture, that wasn't about fishing. That was a warning. And not just to me. A week later I heard from Diana, the young widow who lived 3 houses down. She had the exact same patio furniture as 2 other neighbors, but somehow only she got cited for visual inconsistency with neighborhood aesthetics. Then Maria, a nurse who fosters 3 kids, told me how her kids were banned from the community pool for being too loud. No warning, just a suspension notice. The same day Karen's grandkids were visiting. Are you seeing the pattern? Karen didn't need an army. She was the army. The judge, the jury, the enforcer, and the newsletter columnist. And the worst part? Most people just went along with it, paid the fines, kept quiet, afraid of what might happen if they pushed back. But I wasn't most people, because what Karen didn't know was that behind my polite nods and neighborly smiles, I had already started reading every line of the HOA charter, every bylaw, every amendment. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to turn her weaponized rulebook into my roadmap for revenge. Have you ever dealt with someone who hides behind policies to get what they want? Drop a comment and tell me your worst HOA story. I might feature it in a future video. And don't forget to hit subscribe. This war's just getting started. Next up, I discovered something buried deep in the documents, something Karen didn't want anyone to see. The lake wasn't even owned by the HOA. After the fishing fine, I started doing what any reasonable father with too much grief, too much time, and a background in finance would do. I investigated. Not the kind of file a complaint and hope for the best investigation. No, I went full Wall Street. Deep dives, paper trails, public records, cross-reference tax documents with LLC registrations like I was prepping for a hostile takeover. Because I had a feeling something wasn't adding up. So one afternoon, I'm sitting at my kitchen table with HOA bylaws in one hand and a mug of gas-fashion gray coffee in the other when I find it. Tucked in the middle of a 73-page document titled Community Resource Access Agreement was this line: Recreational lease of Lake Park Sol 12 remains under control of Meridian Development Corporation through 2026. Wait, what? I read it again and again. The HOA didn't own the lake. They leased it from a development company. And that lease, it was set to expire in less than 60 days. I felt a rush of adrenaline, like finding a hidden ace in a poker game you didn't even know you were playing. So I did what any grieving, mildly enraged dad would do next. I went looking for allies. And that's when I met Merrick Henderson. I was out walking the dog when I saw him. A tall, older gentleman in a Panama hat, strolling his golden retriever like he had all the time in the world. I introduced myself, mentioned the lake incident, and boom, his whole vibe changed. "Ah, so you've met her," he said, like he'd just heard I'd been diagnosed with HOA cancer. That same afternoon, I sat across from him in a home library that smelled like old leather and quiet power. The man had files. Not notes, not screenshots, files. Like he'd been waiting years for someone to ask the right question. "Karen's not just enforcing rules," he said, sipping coffee that tasted like it had a PhD. "She's playing a long game." He laid out the board. Karen had been running the HOA unopposed for 8 years, and she owned a boutique real estate firm that specialized in luxury communities. Let me guess, you already see where this is going. Whenever someone violated too many codes, racked up too many fines, or got fed up with the bullying, they sold. And guess who bought their homes? LLCs. Shell companies. Names like Sierra Vista Holdings, Lakeside Realty Trust, Wellington Partners, LLC. All of them traced, quietly, cleverly, back to Karen. She was running a full-blown acquisition pipeline, using the HOA as a filter. Bleed people dry, buy their homes cheap, fix them up, sell at a profit. This wasn't about paint colors. It wasn't about mailbox height. It was about control, power, and money. Oh, and the lake. Merrick leaned in, lowered his voice like we were planning a heist. She's trying to buy it, not for the HOA, for herself. That's when I knew. This wasn't a neighborhood problem anymore. This was a hostile corporate maneuver wrapped in a cul-de-sac. And I wasn't about to let my daughter grow up in a place ruled by a petty dictator with a luxury addiction and a God complex. Ever wondered how deep HOA corruption can go? Smash that like button if you've ever had to dig for truth in your own neighborhood. Drop a comment if you've seen something shady where you live. I'm reading every single one. And hey, subscribe, because this story, it's just warming up. Next up, I meet the second piece of my resistance, a retired banker with a memory like a hard drive, and evidence that made my blood boil. Stay tuned for Part 4, Building the Underground Resistance. Every revolution starts with a conversation, and mine started over a second cup of dark roast and a stack of HOA violation letters that looked more like parking tickets from hell. After Merrick dropped the bombshell about Karen's shell companies and her attempt to buy the lake, I knew I needed more than proof. I needed people. You see, tyrants don't fall because one person stands up. They fall when enough people realize they're not standing alone. That's when Marek said 4 words that changed everything. You should meet Samuel. Enter. Samuel Washington, former local bank owner, Vietnam vet, widower, sharp suit, voice like Morgan Freeman with a grudge. The man was elegance and quiet fire wrapped in a silk tie. He invited me to his home, a gorgeous 2-story with jazz playing low in the background and a wall lined with leather-bound books that smelled like wisdom. He didn't waste time. He sat me down in his study, opened a laptop, and said, "Make them feel important. I've been keeping track." And boy had he ever. The spreadsheets, dates, property records, fine histories, racial breakdowns of who got cited and who didn't. Samuel had spent the last 10 years tracking everything Karen's HOA had done. Started it after my nephew got fined for leaving his bike on the lawn, he said calmly, while Karen's grandkids left theirs out every weekend. The data? It was brutal. Homeowners of color were nearly 3x more likely to receive violations. Newcomers to the neighborhood were fined more often, faster, and for smaller infractions than longtime residents. Homes cited more than 4 times in a year, almost all were later sold at below market value, and guess who bought them? Yup. Karen Shell LLC. This wasn't a neighborhood. It was a slow-action acquisition strategy disguised as lawn care. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. "She's not just corrupt," I said. "She's strategic." Samuel nodded, calm as ever. "And that's why she needs to be dismantled strategically." So we got to work. We formed a private messaging group, invite only, no names, just initials. We rotated our meeting spots. Samuel's house, the back room of a local bakery, the private conference room at the library, even once in the gardening section of a Lowe's. Ironically, the only time Karen's spies didn't bother us. And slowly people started showing up. A retired teacher fined for non-compliant Christmas lights. A young widow cited for mosquito hazards after Karen led an unannounced inspection of her yard. A healthcare worker whose foster kids were banned from the pool after Karen's grandkids wanted it quiet. A florist who got cited for overusing color in her front garden. Seriously. Every story was the same. Isolate, intimidate, violate, acquire. It was HOA gentrification, with a fake smile and a clipboard. We weren't just angry anymore. We were organized. We shared documents, compared violation photos, matched property transfers. Some of us even started pulling permits from the city archives. What we found? Karen had been lobbying City Hall for years, positioning herself to buy the lake and build luxury homes. She wasn't preserving the community. She was flipping one broken family at a time. And here's the irony. The more she tried to silence us, the stronger we became. Every time someone got fined, another neighbor asked to join the group. And slowly the silence that had blanketed Lakeside Estates for years started to crack. If you've ever felt like the little guy in your own neighborhood, share your HOA horror story in the comments. This is a safe place now. And don't forget to subscribe. This isn't just entertainment, it's strategy. Up next, I stopped playing defense. I started planning my first strike. Because if Karen wanted the lake, I was about to take it off the table. Part 5. When harassment goes too far. There's a fine line between enforcement and obsession. And Karen? She didn't just cross it. She planted a flag on the other side and built a monument. After word started spreading that I was asking questions, I suddenly became HOA target number 1. It was like someone flipped a switch in the violation matrix. Improper mailbox height. Unapproved weed control. My garage door was apparently the wrong shade of taupe, which, by the way, is exactly the same taupe it was when I moved in with Karen's written approval. $2,000 in fines, in 2 weeks. Appeals? Denied. Emails? Lost. Phone calls? Never returned. I half expected to get fined for blinking too loud. And then, it got personal. One afternoon, Salen left her bike leaning against our driveway for maybe 10 minutes while she ran inside to grab a snack. 15 minutes later, a violation notice was taped to our door with a time-stamped photo of the bike. Someone was watching. Not figuratively, not symbolically, literally watching our house. Waiting, lurking, like we were contestants on some twisted reality show called HOA Surveillance Suburbia Edition. That night Selen came to me, tears in her eyes. To me. "Dad, why is that woman so mean to us? I didn't do anything wrong." And I just froze. I've stared down multi-million-dollar investors. I've been in meetings where one wrong sentence could sink a company. But nothing prepares you for the moment your child looks up at you and asks why she's being targeted. I didn't have an answer, not one I could say out loud. Because power makes some people cruel, sweetheart. Because she thinks no one can stop her. Because bullies don't need a reason. But instead, I said, "It's not your fault, and I promise you this ends soon." That night, I sat on the back porch staring out at the lake. The lake I used to see as peaceful. The lake Karen wanted to own. The lake that, if I played this right, could become my checkmate. Because while Karen was busy measuring grass blades with a ruler, I was closing in on a private meeting with Meridian Development's executive board. She had no idea I was about to make an all-cash offer for the property she'd spent months trying to acquire. No loans, no negotiations, just one clean, quiet signature. But I wasn't going to do it yet. No, I needed her to overplay her hand, push too far, show everyone exactly who she was. Ever had a neighbor who just couldn't leave you alone? Hit that like button if you know what it's like to feel watched in your own home. And drop a comment if you've ever had to draw a line in the sand with someone on a power trip. Don't forget to subscribe, because what's coming next? Let's just say, Karen throws a party, and I crash it. With legal papers? Next up, buying the lake out from under her. They tried their hardest, putting all their effort into producing. All their effort into producing. Without reaping any fruit. There's something oddly poetic about beating someone at their own game. Especially when that someone has spent the past 6 months turning your life into a bureaucratic circus act, and you used to buy companies for a living. See, while Karen was busy bullying Selen for her bike placement and inspecting trash bins like she worked for the EPA, I was making quiet moves. Moves that didn't come with loud announcements or HOA newsletters. Just silence, paperwork, and capital. Here's what she didn't know. The lake? It wasn't hers. Not even close. It still belonged to Meridian Development Corporation, and Meridian was bleeding cash from a failed commercial project that had tanked during the pandemic. They needed to sell something, fast. And Karen? She had made them an offer. $300,000, 0 cents, spread out over 18 months with sketchy financing and probably a few IOUs. But me? At a clean, simple counteroffer. $350,000, 0 cents, all cash, close in 7 days. I met Meridian's executive, Tom Branson, in a law office downtown. Neutral ground. No HOA spies. No clipboard crusaders, just business. "You can close in 7 days?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "I can close in 3, I replied. "But I like to give people the weekend." By the time I left that office, I had a signed preliminary agreement and a smile so wide I could have swallowed a whole bass. Now here's where it gets good. Karen didn't know I was the buyer. The paperwork was filed under Thornycroft Holdings LLC, a name with no obvious connection to me, just a quiet little company with a quiet little mission: take back our peace. Meanwhile, Karen was getting ready to throw a lakeside party. A massive one. Catered food, white wine, live music. A celebration of the community spirit, she called it. What she didn't know. That very same day I signed the final deed. The lake. and the 10-foot shoreline perimeter surrounding it was now mine. Not the HOA's, not Karen's, not up for debate. And the lease agreement giving residents recreational access? Yeah, that expired in 28 days. But I didn't need to wait, because the HOA had violated multiple clauses in the agreement over the years. Improper maintenance, unauthorized gatherings, and, ironically, environmental mismanagement. I had grounds to terminate immediately, so I made some calls. First, a real estate attorney, then, a local conservation specialist, and finally, a friendly neighborhood police officer who just so happened to enjoy fishing. And then I waited, calm, quiet, because when you've just bought the very weapon your enemy was planning to use against you, you don't fire it right away. You let them march proudly into your trap. Ever dreamed of flipping the script on the neighborhood tyrant? Hit that like button if you've ever wanted to outsmart someone who thought they were untouchable. Comment below. What would you do if you owned the community lake? And make sure to subscribe because next, Karen throws her biggest party yet and I show up with a microphone, a lawyer, and a trespass warning. Stay tuned for part 7, the party, the microphone, and the meltdown. You ever watch someone build their own downfall in real time? Because that's exactly what Karen did. She threw what she called a legacy lakeside celebration at the community lake. Invitations were sent, hand-delivered of course, to long-standing residents only. Translation: anyone who had moved in after 2015 or questioned her authority didn't make the cut. I wasn't invited, which was perfect, because I had a surprise RSVP of my own. You see, while Karen was clinking Chardonnay with her inner circle and smiling like she'd just been crowned Queen of Suburbia, I arrived with 3 guests. Merrick in his best church blazer, Samuel holding a leather folder like it contained the 10 Commandments, and Officer Reynolds, local law enforcement and part-time fisherman, fully uniformed and fully briefed. Oh, and one more thing, I brought the deed. The moment I stepped onto the grass, Karen spotted me. Her smile evaporated faster than cheap hairspray in a heat wave. "This is a private HOA event," she hissed, marching toward me in heels too high for the terrain. "You have no right to be here." I didn't say a word. Instead, I walked calmly to the microphone, the same one she'd used just minutes earlier to toast community tradition, and tapped it twice. Tap. The music cut. Heads turned. Dozens of people, wine glasses in hand, stared. And I smiled. "Good afternoon, neighbors. I hope you're all enjoying this beautiful day by the lake." Karen lunged for the mic. I stepped to the side. "Before you refill your drinks, I wanted to make a quick announcement, one that directly concerns this property, the lake, and every single person standing here." People glanced at each other. The mood shifted. As of 3 days ago, the lake and the 10-foot shoreline surrounding it are now private property, owned by me. Gasps. Real ones, like the kind you only hear in soap operas and surprise will readings. Karen froze mid-step. I held up the deed. Thornycroft Holdings, LLC, for those curious, is a company I formed for one purpose: to buy the lake that Karen was negotiating for. Oh, and the recreational agreement, the one that gave the HOA limited access? I've officially terminated it. As of right now, dead silence. Then a voice from the crowd. "Wait, is she serious?" Another. "Karen said she was improving the lake for us." I kept going. In fact, according to legal records, Karen was planning to build a private lakeside lounge and reduce fishing access by over 20%. But don't worry, this isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. Karen finally found her voice. "This is illegal. The community has rights." I turned to Officer Reynolds. He nodded. "Actually, Karen, it's all legal, and if anyone refuses to vacate private property, we're prepared to file trespassing complaints." Karen's face went red, like fire hydrant red. She looked like she was about to explode, then melt. Right there between the balloon arch and the crab dip. As residents began packing up awkwardly, I closed with one final message. Next time someone tries to buy your trust with wine and charm, maybe ask what they're getting in return. Ever dreamed of serving justice with a microphone in hand? Drop a comment if you would have stayed to watch Karen melt down, or quietly grabbed a cupcake and left. Hit that like button if you believe neighborhood power should serve people, not crush them. And make sure to subscribe, because this war isn't over yet. World. In the final night, coming up next, Karen retaliates with everything she's got and targets my daughter. Part 8. Crossing the line. When they come for your kids. They say every war has casualties. But I never thought the first one would be my daughter's peace of mind. A week after the party, after Karen's royal dreams crumbled in front of 50 Chardonnay-sipping neighbors, I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. Because when narcissists lose power, they don't reflect, they retaliate. And when Karen couldn't get to me with fines or scare tactics anymore, she came after Selin. It started with whispers. At school, kids who used to sit with her at lunch started moving to other tables. Truls, she came home quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet parents recognize, like an alarm bell with no sound. Brianna said her mom told her we're troublemakers, Selin said one night, barely touching her food. That you're trying to ruin the neighborhood. I put down my fork, my stomach turned. Brianna's mom, HOA vice president, Karen's right hand. This wasn't playground gossip. This was targeted social sabotage. Where are they saying we don't belong here? What did we do wrong? Let me tell you, there is nothing more infuriating than watching your child hurt because of something you had to do. But I kept my voice calm. We didn't do anything wrong, sweetheart, I told her. Sometimes people in power get scared when others stand up to them, and instead of owning their mistakes, they blame the ones who call them out. She nodded, but I could see the doubt behind her eyes. 14 is old enough to know what exclusion feels like, but not always old enough to understand why. That night, I sat on the porch again, alone, same chair, same lake view. Only this time, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired, beaten in a different kind of way. For a brief moment, I considered packing it all up, selling the house, leaving the neighborhood behind, finding somewhere else where my daughter wouldn't be the girl with the dad who fought the HOA. But then I remembered something Merrick told me. You don't teach a kid strength by running, you teach it by standing your ground, even when it's hard. And that's when the next move came to me. What if Karen wanted to paint us as villains? I'd show the neighborhood who we really were. Ever been pushed so far you questioned if it was worth it? Drop a comment if you've ever had to stand up, not for your... Smash that like button if you believe no child should be caught in adult battles. And subscribe because, what's coming next? Let's just say I take off the gloves. And I don't just defend my kid, I flip the entire board. Next up, Part 9. The Fishing Pass Gambit. There's a moment in every long game where your opponent makes a fatal mistake, not because they are outsmarted, but because they've run out of masks. Here in Wellington finally hit that point. The Fishing Pass program had taken off. Kids were smiling, parents were relaxed. The neighborhood felt more like a community than it had in years. Which meant Karen was cornered. She'd lost her influence, lost her board, lost her grip. But what she did next? That was pure desperation. It started with a whisper campaign, that the lake water was polluted, unsafe, even toxic. She passed around homemade flyers with dramatic phrases like, "Toxic runoff threatens local children," "An unauthorized conservation activity, illegal." But I had already published third-party lab results showing the water quality had actually improved under private care. Strike one. Then came the bribe. Merrick called me one evening, laughter in his voice. "You'll love this," he said. "Karen offered to wipe all my HOA violations and give me a board seat if I convince you to sell the lake back." "Did you record it?" I asked, already grinning. "Of course I did," he replied. She forgot I was an ethics lawyer for 30 years. Strike two. And then the final act. One night around 11:30 p.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected Rachel's Lake. I opened the security camera app. There she was, Karen Wellington, dressed in black, crouched near the dock, two others with her, both former board members. She was pouring something from a small bottle into the lake, right where the kids usually fished. I didn't even hesitate. I forwarded the footage to Officer Reynolds and called the non-emergency line. Within 30 minutes they were in custody, caught trespassing and suspected of environmental tampering. Turns out the liquid was fertilizer concentrate, high in nitrates, enough to trigger an algae bloom if we hadn't caught it in time. She wasn't just trying to ruin me. She was willing to poison a lake full of kids' memories to do it. And that was her final fall. The next week, Karen was formally charged with trespassing, attempted environmental contamination, and criminal mischief. Investigators began digging through HOA financials from her time in power. What they found? Selective enforcement, missing funds, properties sold suspiciously under market value, and somehow ending up in the hands of shell companies tied to Wellington properties. Multiple lawsuits followed. She lost her license, then her business, then finally her house, which, poetic justice alert, was one of the mortgage notes I had quietly purchased during this entire saga. I never foreclosed. I didn't have to. She put it on the market herself. No one bought it. Her name was Toxic. And Lakeside Estates? Well, we finally had something Karen never gave us. A choice. That's when I made my final move. I hosted a meeting open to everyone except current HOA leadership. Nearly the whole community showed up. I would transfer ownership of Rachel's Lake to a community trust under 3 conditions. Restructure the HOA board with term limits and public elections. Overhaul all HOA regulations for clarity, fairness, and accountability. Establish an independent ethics committee made up of rotating residents. And then I dropped the final surprise. Over the past few months, I've also quietly purchased mortgage notes on 20% of the homes in this neighborhood, including Karen's. But there was an audible gasp. I don't intend to foreclose. In fact, I'm offering refinancing at below market rates once we fix the system. The vote to replace the HOA board passed almost unanimously. Karen resigned in disgrace. And just like that, the tyrant was gone. Not with a bang, but with a shuffle of feet walking away from her. Ever seen a bully lose everything because they couldn't let go of control? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? Like, if you believe real power isn't in controlling people, it's in freeing them. And if this story meant something to you, subscribe, because justice doesn't always come in courtrooms. Sometimes it shows up at a lake with a fishing rod and a daughter. Next up, the epilogue. Rachel's Lake, 1 year later.